Hello my dear good folks, the name's Leafy and welcome back to Let's Talk Slow About Games Genshin Edition. A lot of you liked the first part where I talked about some of Genshin's biggest lore misconceptions, so let's go through another bunch of them that I both left out from that first video alongside a couple of the ones that some of you have mentioned in that video's comment section. Of course, just to be safe, spoiler alert for the following content from Genshin's Archon and Interlude quest, proceed under your own discretion. And please, do not post leaked story content in the comments. Anything that I find relating to leaks will be deleted. Right, let's just jump right into it. Starting from lore misconception number 1, which has to do with people thinking that the Gnoses are the source of an Archon's authority over their respective elements. Now, honestly, I put this in the number 1 because of something funny I did between two of my older videos, because in this video talking about Celestia, which was the more recent one, I said this: with the Gnoses giving the Archons the ability to directly resonate with them, alongside the authority over the element that each Gnosis held. Which I know for a fact isn't true, because in the other video which was published last year about Irminsul, I said this: since we know that the authority of the element doesn't seem to be chained exclusively with the Gnosis. So yeah, in the more recent video, I was just being a dumbass, messed up the script, and ended up just reading that without thinking. And that's why number 1 is about this Gnosis misconception, because I want to clarify that the Gnosis doesn't seem to be the source of an Archon's authority over their respective elements. And quite frankly, if people are confused, then I'm not too surprised, because the information surrounding the nature of the Gnosis is still rather vague and convoluted that I can probably make a whole nother video about it. But to shorten it, the biggest examples of why we know that elemental authority doesn't strictly correlate with the Gnosis is, to 1, just observe the Harbingers who has held the Gnosis taken from the Archons. Signora got both the Anemo and Geonosis, yet it doesn't look like she was bestowed any sort of new authority or ability. Scaramouche straight up made a Gundam that was dismantled pretty quickly. Meanwhile, the Tori picked up the Dendro and Electro-Gnosis like he was just picking up an Uber food delivery. Nuvalet just straight up said, I don't need it. Put a tie on it and gifted it to Arlecchino. Doesn't look like any sort of authority transfers happening there. And 2, the simplest and biggest clue is Focalors' sacrifice. If the authority is indeed with the Gnosis, why didn't she just dispossess herself of it? Why did she have to separately destroy her divinity and herself? Well, the simple answer is as we have stated. The Gnosis is most likely not the source of that authority. So, what is the source then? Honestly, I don't know. It's always mentioned that it's the seat of divinity that gives them that authority, plus, of course, the existence of the previous sovereign's power. But whether or not it's a literal physical seat of divinity in Celestia instead of it just being a metaphor, God, or I guess the dev only knows. Genshin likes to take liberties in switching them around. Focalors showcased herself destroying the seat of divinity by impaling herself, so as far as we know, the true shape of this divinity itself seems to be the respective seat bearer's own divine soul. But it's a bit more confusing, because in Teyvat, it looks like if gods die, their soul and power sort of remains part of the world, which would make it so that anchoring authority to their soul would kind of keep it there forever. Is it just a case where there's a difference between their divine soul and just, their normal soul? I don't know, that's a topic for another video, because it'll literally be too long to talk about here. So we shall carry on to misconception number 2, which is the fact that there are more than 2 confirmed Descender identities. Many people are convinced that the identities of other multiple Descenders have pretty much been confirmed. The most popular one being that the second who came is the second Descender. While this is highly likely, we still don't have any confirmation on what or who this being was. So what ends up happening is that people began throwing random deities into the mix to put into that second Descender timeline. Some would say that it was the Shades, but we know that's inaccurate, since the Shades are grouped in with the Heavenly Principles as the first Descender due to them essentially being copies of the Primordial One. Others theorize that it was Nibelung who returned with forbidden knowledge, but judging by the fact that Irminsul records everything Teyvat related, and Nibelung is originally of Teyvat, that's probably not it either. And some even went as far as theorizing that Zhongli is the second descender because his old ass can technically be stuck into the timeline, but I gave that a further debunking in my Irminsul video. The third descender, on the other hand, while we know that their remnants are part of what makes the Gnosis, we have zero clue regarding the identity of who or what was split into making these things and why it was that they were so willing to cooperate with the heavenly principles for such a cause. Some other people theorized that it was actually our twin. This is usually prefaced by the other theory of people believing that the Abyss twin we actually see now is just a husk of what they were and our real twin is dead. But considering the fact that the bigger mystery is how our twin is actually recorded in Irminsul, this makes the descender side of things pretty much void. Dvalin has also been thrown in here a couple of times, and it still doesn't make it sound any more plausible than him being the second descender. My personal bet on who the third descender is would have something to do with the origins of the Heart of Naberius that Albedo and Rhinedottir found, which became the catalyst to Rhinedottir going on a solo journey and telling Albedo to discover the truth of the world. It is also to say that there's a big chance that there weren't only 4 descenders. Nahida was pretty vague in expanding on this notion. She only mentioned that we were the 4th, but never said whether or not there were only 4. And considering a lot of the other Tevat legends have mentioned many beings or invaders from beyond the skies, there's a decent chance that there indeed is more than the 4 we have garnered knowledge of from the Fatui intelligences. But as we know now, there are only 2 confirmed descender identities. That is the Heavenly Principles and us, the Traveler. Technically, even Nahida only made the theory that the Heavenly Principles is the first descender, so to her, I guess we are the only fully confirmed one, but we have Byakuyakoku to sort of help us confirm that. We'll let her figure out the rest, since she did say she was gonna try to confirm the identity of the other mystery too. We'll just wait till that day comes. Now, misconception number 3 comes from the Sumeru times, which was the notion that King Deshret was in love with Greater Lord Rukkhadevata. Admittedly, this was a mistake that I also made, and it would be a mistake that a lot of people would be making if they didn't really pay attention to the Jet World Quest series, The Dirge of Bilqis. A lot of it was also due to the notion that some might misunderstand the title of Goddess of Flowers to belong to Rukkhadevata, when it actually belongs to another Sumeru goddess named Nabu Malikata, who Deshret truly harbored affection for. She was a survivor of a race of angels that had long been casted away by Celestia for presumably looking at knowledge from beyond the skies. While it seemed like her race of angels were stripped of their intelligence and were reduced to husks, Nabu Malikata was somehow able to miraculously hold her existence together, though it is heavily implied that she was going to succumb to it one day anyway. Nabu Malikata alongside King Deshret and Rukkhadevata were known as the eternal companion gods of Sumeru, and for a while they were great friends and ruled together. Until one day, due to his growing love for Nabu Malikata, King Deshret sought to challenge Celestia's rule in order to alleviate the angel's curse, all by seeking forbidden knowledge and using it to mount a power strong enough to fight Celestia. At first, Nabu Malikata was like, "Hell nah bruh, my own people got screwed for going against them." But then King Deshret was like, "Come on, let's have some fun being rebellious teenagers going against the words of our parents." And Nabu Malikata thought about it for 2 seconds before she kinda went,
"You son of a bitch, I'm in!"
And then Rukkhadevata, who was the sensible child who went hell nah and actually meant it, removed herself from that situation, moving to the rainforest, all while hoping that the rebellious street life won't be the downfall of her 2 old friends. And wouldn't you know it, it did become the downfall of her 2 old friends. After Rukkhadevata left, Deshret and Nabu Malikata formed their own civilization known as Ai-Khanum, where they continued to develop the use of forbidden knowledge. But as all things associated with that thing would come to pass, nothing ended up going well for the civilization, nor for Nabu Malikata and King Deshret. It pretty much started off with a bang. Nabu Malikata, in her pursuit of guiding Deshret to a plane of higher knowledge, died in the process of the ritual. And then a divine nail dropped itself on their civilization, which then became the eternal sandstorm at Mount Damaphan. Out of presumed heartbreak, Deshret then built an eternal oasis called the Orchard of Pyridesa, as a cemetery for the fallen goddess of flowers. So if you're still doubting whether or not he loved her, look at what the dude made for her as what is essentially her grave. Then he also built the city of Akhnamun before evolving it into the state of Gurabad. Many of the mortals who lived in Gurabad were then given the task of guarding the eternal oasis. After going through several more iterations of fallen civilizations that was all centered around sheltering his need to research forbidden knowledge, his civilization ended at Kaj Nisut, where he presumably separated his mind from his body and achieved death through that medium, tragically achieving none of what he had set out to do beforehand and ended up having to rely on Rukkhadevata's help to put a pause on the curse that he brought to his lands. Apep ate his body to consume his knowledge as part of their deal, only to be tainted by forbidden knowledge. That same ailment trudged upon the remnants of his civilization as they began to feel the curse of Elazar, and Deshret tainted the land with more forbidden knowledge, which then also tainted Rukkhadevata, which then caused more problems for Irminsul as we eventually know of it. So, all in all, Guy had a rough ending to his life. Literally everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Everything he could have lost, he actually ended up losing. The things that love makes you do. Alright, enough of that depressing crap. Let's roll up to misconception number 4, and that is people still thinking that Skirk's master is Rhinedottir. This one I can honestly split the blame in sort of like a 70-30 kind of thing, both on the people who are supposed to read the story and the way Genshin themselves have written the dialogue which clarifies Skirk's answer regarding who her own master is. So let's review the scene a little. We start with Skirk telling us that the narwhal was her master's pet, and then Paimon asked her who her master is, to which she replied, Sertologi. Now, if it ended there, then the question of who her master was should be done and dusted. No need to give it more thought, we'll figure out who Sertologi is later on. The issue comes with the part that follows suit, where Skirk realizes that we haven't got a clue who Sertologi is. So she tried to give us other descriptions of her master, to which she started with the fowl, which yielded the same results, before suddenly mentioning the visionary Vedrfolnir and then ending on gold Rhinedottir. Here is the part where people immediately checked out with the conclusion, oh, Sertologi is just another one of Rhinedottir's name. Therefore, Rhinedottir is Skirk's master. Which is an understandable conclusion because why would Skirk use those other people's name as a description of her master if that is not her master's other names? Mind you, for further context, at that point of Genshin's release, we are not yet familiar with the names of the 5 sinners of Khaenri'ah. So most, if not all players didn't think to see that those other names are actually separate individuals, instead of it being a list of other known titles. Vedrfolnir only showed up as a voice inside our head during the 3.5 Traveler's Quest Carrybear, but his name was never revealed to us. And it's also understandable for Genshin players to think that one individual in the lore can have multiple titles because that's not at all an unusual occurrence. Look at Morax. Dude has 9 titles as far as the lore has told us, so it wouldn't be too confusing for people to see that someone who we have no clue about could have been known by more than a couple of names. However, the reason I still put most of the portion of the blame on the players is because Skirk after that mentions that her master and Rhinedottir were sort of similar people in that regards, meaning that these 2 names are separate from one another and are therefore 2 separate individuals. But then she was quick to just move away from the topic, and for those who are already stuck with the initial conclusion, well, tough luck. We ain't getting any more explanation until way later when Paimon very briefly reiterated during 4.7's Traveler's Quest bedtime story that Sertologi is Skirk's master. But I can assume that people were more focused on the whole revelation of Vedrfolnir and the brotherly connection to Dainsleif to really clock in that fact if they hadn't before. Still, had those who were unaware gave Skirk's following couple of sentences a tad bit more attention, then they wouldn't have to make this sort of misconception to begin with, which is why I still place more of the misconception on the player's side. But it is to say that Genshin certainly didn't help by making Skirk speak as if she had no clue how to better explain her master's identity, instead of using the other names we might have not known to begin with. And that leads us to the final misconception of the video, which relate to how some people think that Azhdaha, Dvalin, and Orobashi were confirmed sovereigns. Now in the case of Orobashi, it should be outright obvious that they were not the Electro-Sovereign. To begin with, Orobashi was a serpent, not a dragon, and seemed to have ties with Liyue before Inazuma since they were beaten out of their territory by Deus Auri, which is another one of more access title if you don't know, and then was beaten out by A out of Inazuma before finding themselves as the god serpent of Enkanomiya. Dvalin on the other hand might be a little bit less clear since a lot of his origins are sort of shrouded in ambiguity. However, there is evidence that Venti and Dvalin met somewhere within the realms of 1 or 2,000 years ago, and Volume 1 of Breeze Amidst the Forest also mentions that the Wind Dragon was born in the high heavens, which would outright mean that Dvalin is most likely not a sovereign since they would have to be of Teyvat origins predating the heavenly principles. Now, Azhdaha is the one that actually has a bit more merit to the sovereign claims, mostly due to the original Chinese titles that he held being the same line of titles that are used to describe the sovereigns, and his bishop connection bears a lot of resemblance to that of the Hydro Sovereign of the old. He also claims himself to bear memories and weight that is as old or even older than the mountains and oceans of Teyvat itself, which would certainly be possible since Zhongli himself have presumed that the age of an elemental being like Azhdaha would surely eclipse anything that is currently living in Teyvat. However, there are still some inconsistencies that needs to be ironed out if we truly want to confirm his status. One is that the original Chinese title of Dragon Lord has been seen to not strictly be related to only sovereigns. One of Beidou's epithet is also titled Dragon Lord and, well, she ain't no sovereign. 2. While bishops have always been akin to being under the rule of the elemental dragon sovereigns, bishops and dragons are not the same. Meanwhile, we know that Azhdaha's official English title is Lord of the Bishops, yet he is also known somewhere in the lore as the Earth Dragon, so it becomes this jumbled sense of not really knowing what he really is. 3. Something that we've seen living sovereigns say all the time is to describe the heavenly principles and their archon underlings as usurpers. Azhdaha does not do this, and it looks like he has more of an issue with the humans who ends up wrecking the environment rather than the change of rule that occurred in Teyvat. In the end, for me, the thing that really sets apart true sovereigns of the old from these 3 is just the sheer size of them. Remember, Shukoto's Gosoyoth form was an Abyss reincarnation, which may not have been a clear representative of what the prime form of the Pyro Dragon might have been. Meanwhile, if we see the pure scale that Apep, who is a confirmed straight-up original sovereign, and how they towered even over a desert sandstorm, I'd say that they're still a long ways away from us from seeing another sovereign with that sort of presence. Neuvillette can't turn like that due to the Enkanomian prophecy, so we're just gonna have to wait and see. Funnily enough, if we're just looking at size, Orobashi is the one that seemed to have that sort of scale proper of a sovereign. But ironically, they're actually the one that is most easily debunked. And there you go. That's 5 more misconceptions from Genshin's lore that players still sort of have until now. Let me know what you think of them, and feel free to let me know more misconceptions that you guys may have remembered or you might have had yourself in the first place, and maybe I can make another one of these soon enough. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did, and I wish you all a wonderful day. Until the next video, the name's Sleepy, and I'll see you guys next time. Sayonara.